All right, George, are you ready to sing with me?
I'm ready to sing.
Let's do it.
Let's go, Mitch.
Tell me the story of Jesus, write on my heart every word. Tell me the story most precious, sweetest that I've ever heard.
Wow.
I think we sounded pretty good.
Well, kind of.
Well, George, I love to hear the Jesus stories, and I know you love to tell them.
I love to tell them.
So let's chat about it. Welcome to Clear Creek Chat. That's Chat with two T's because this podcast is coming to you from Chattanooga, Tennessee, and is a ministry of the Clear Creek Church of Christ. In each episode, we gather together a friend or two and talk about issues that touch our lives locally, but also have a broader implication for the kingdom of God. My name is Mitchell Halstead, and today I'm joined by my friend, George Taylor.
Hello.
Welcome to the podcast, George. Now, George, people may not know, but for many years now, you have worked as a narrator of audiobooks.
Yes.
And I'm curious, I believe you told me earlier, you've got approximately 50 titles that you've worked on throughout the course of this time. Some of them, many of them are still available.
Exactly.
But I'm wondering, and I know that you don't just get to pick any random book you want to do. You have to be asked to do it or invited or something like that. Maybe you can appeal to do one. But if you could narrate any book, your favorite book or the dream book, what book would you like to provide your dulcet tones for?
Actually, the book that would most appeal to me, I've already recorded.
Really?
Yes.
And what is that?
I recorded A Christmas Carol.
Oh, Charles Dickens.
Charles Dickens, okay? The ultimate story, other than the story of people coming to Jesus, the ultimate story of transformation and rebirth.
Oh, it is a wonderful redemption story.
I have recorded it. I actually hired a young lady to record with me, so she picked up the female characters.
Awesome.
And we added sound effects and the whole 9 yards, and that is still available for purchase.
Narration by George.
Narrationbygeorge.com. Yes.
Which you can go to, dear listeners. Our tens of listeners may go to your site.
Or 15.
Who knows? Well, I wanted to ask you one other question just for fun, because I know that part of your narration process is that sometimes you provide accents.
Right.
And you're talking in your normal voice right now.
Exactly.
Give us your favorite accent to do.
So my favorite accent happens to be a little British.
That's not Cockney necessarily, right?
Well, it can be Cockney if you want it to be.
That's good, man. Did you use that or some versions of those?
I used all of those in narration, in the Christmas Carol narration, and because it is a Dickens book written by an English author, the whole narration is in an English accent.
So did you have to pick like the base English accent that you could return to for all of the narrating parts?
Oh, yeah. I had to
versus the
use
dialogue?
that. Yeah. And most of the dialogue, except for the characters that we know are just kind of what you would call the lower class in England, which is most likely the Cockney.
No offense to any Cockney speakers out there
at all. That's just
1800s.
Yeah. This is 1800s. But it's the way society was then. And I would switch back and forth between the base accent and this Cockney accent, and make, depending on which character I was working with at the time.
That's pretty cool.
It was a lot of fun to do, and as we've said before in our pre-talking, it's a lot of work.
I'm sure it is.
Buy the book, please.
But you don't have to buy this podcast, and that's cool. Well, the reason you're on this podcast today, George, is because in our church's staff meeting recently, we were talking about various wins, neat things that we've seen from some of our church members. And I heard that you have started your own podcast, and it has a very specific purpose. Well, I'll let you jump into the depth of it in a few minutes here, but it's called Jesus Stories.
Right.
And you're telling the story of Jesus. Right. Simply put.
Right.
But you've learned some interesting things about the people that we assume have been listening to this. And I'm going to let you talk about that again in a minute, but hearing that you've created a podcast that is for the purpose of proclaiming the name of Jesus, I thought to myself, and Jake and I had talked, like, we got to get George on this podcast to talk about how he's trying to use his unique abilities to proclaim the name and to spread the kingdom. So that's why you're here. That's why George is here today. And I'm excited that you get to share, something you love, podcasting on a podcast.
I am excited to share it. Believe me.
So as we kind of roll into the conversation here, I do want to give you a chance, as we've done with most of our interviews so far, to walk us through a bit about how you have initially came to faith earlier on in your life.
Okay.
And when do you feel like you really started to take ownership of your faith? And by that, I mean understanding the need to be a disciple maker.
Okay.
And to be a Jesus people, as we've heard other people say on this podcast.
Okay. All right. Well, I actually was raised in the faith. I was raised in the Churches of Christ, and during the 50s and the 60s, and I am that old. And it was a time when the church was very solid, but at the same time, during the latter part of that time, it was shifting into some very legalistic type modes. So I left the church in my 20s, like a lot of people do.
Yeah.
I really couldn't handle the legalism and the hypocrisy that was a part of the body at the time, and I just went, I went away. Okay, during my 20s. I came back to the church in the 30s through the efforts of several people. My parents were one of them, or two of them, as the case might be. They usually come that way. So my parents and some people from a congregation in Memphis basically loved me back to Jesus.
Wow.
And I was very, very blessed through those relationships to return and find my Lord again. Okay. All right.
I want to pause and soapbox for a moment here, because
Go ahead.
I know there's got to be people out there. I don't know if they're listening or not, but I know people that worry about their young adult kids who,
with reason,
who maybe have walked away from church for whatever reason, and they worry about it, and they're concerned, and they pray for their kids. And that's a great testament to never give up.
Yeah.
Never give up loving your kid, which parents, they're not going to do that, but never give up believing that they can come back. And as a church body, like, we need to not give up on trying to continue to reach out and draw back in the kids that we have once known and loved. And
exactly.
Never give up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've done over the years in talking with people is, and particularly talking with 20-somethings, I want to find out where they are spiritually, and are they strong? Are they not?
Yeah.
Where are they weak? Where are they, what are they struggling with? It's something I've been able to do just in an informal way over the years, because I've been there.
Yeah. No doubt.
Yeah.
You were going to say, I think you were going to move on to a little bit later in your life.
Yeah, a little bit later in my life was really at the point where I began to start really, as you call it, owning the discipleship idea, if you will, and more so probably in the last 10 or 15 years than any other time in my life. And I've got to credit this congregation with bringing that to life more than anything, because of the teaching that's been done and the emphasis that has been made and the understanding that has come that really, Matthew 28 was a serious command that we need to be going and making disciples. Now, for everybody, that looks different for every person. Okay. My methodology is going to be different from somebody else's, but maybe what I'm doing here with the podcast might be something somebody else can try and maybe improve upon even.
Maybe.
It's one of those things that I kind of look at and go, it's not been done. Let's give it a whirl.
Yeah. So speaking of the podcast, that's why we brought you on here to talk about what you're trying to do through that. But I want to preface it by saying that, and you just mentioned this, like, our church believes that every Christian is called to spread the good news of Jesus. Be a
Right.
missionary
Right.
wherever you are, in whatever means that you can find on a daily basis, in person, in some unique medium like podcasting, if that's something you can do. We're all supposed to be finding ways, seeking ways to make disciples.
Exactly.
Right. So you've been pretty creative and have found a modern approach to proclaiming the name of Christ, podcasting. And by the way, I didn't say this earlier, but the reason we sang Tell Me the Story of Jesus in that awkward way we did in the opener was because that's your theme song.
That's
and,
right.
When I've listened to the first 2 of your episodes so far, and when it fired up, I was like, I love this song. It's just
song-
what we need.
Yeah.
We need to hear the stories.
Story of Jesus. Yes.
And so that's what you named your podcast.
Right.
Jesus Stories.
Right.
What inspired you to do this?
Well, actually, this goes back several years.
Oh, does it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So this actually started with some lessons taught by a pastor and teacher that I dearly love, and a lot of people here do, Patrick Mead. Okay. He was in Chattanooga several years ago. I think it was over here at North River Christian Church. And he had come to visit on a Sunday, and I went over to hear him. And he just opened his Bible to the book of Mark and said, I'm just going to tell you some Jesus stories. And he started in Mark 1 and just talked about each little segment of Jesus' life, just one right after the other. And as he would say, it was brilliant.
Because he's Scottish.
He's Scottish. So I came back here to Clear Creek. Now I've taught an adult class here for years. And when I came here and had some control really over what I could teach, because I always co-teach with somebody, and we were up at looking for material, I said, let's just tell the stories of Jesus. Okay? So we started teaching the story of Jesus, but doing it a little bit differently. We went to a chronological Bible that was put together by F. LaGard Smith. And using that Bible, we started teaching the life of Jesus in a class we just called Jesus Stories.
I did not know this.
Yeah, yeah. And so meanwhile, while I'm doing this, I've got a podcast for Narration by George that's kind of languishing for lack of content because I had moved away from doing a lot of audiobooks. And so I went, wait a minute. I've got the greatest content in the world. What do I do?
You don't even have to write it.
Well, I could.
I'm kidding. Yeah.
And that's what I started doing.
Yeah.
I just sat down and started writing. I'm going, how can I tell the story of Jesus in plain, ordinary, everyday English? But when you tell the story of Jesus, you always bump into things that you don't understand, things that are weird.
Sure.
Okay? All right? I mean, what does it mean to go to Jerusalem for the Passover?
Yeah. Historical, cultural things.
Yeah. What's a synagogue look like?
Yeah.
Why is, he travels 15 miles. How did he get those 15 miles? We do it today in a car in 30 minutes. He walked.
He did.
Okay? So we have to translate into 21st century ease, this first century lifestyle, and move this language into the 21st century so that it's comprehensible to the people who are hearing it, and maybe hearing it for the first time.
Maybe. Hopefully.
Or maybe hearing it and going, I always wondered about that. Okay? So I said, okay. I began writing, ideas gelled, and the format slowly came about. So here we are with about a 20-minute segment every podcast. The podcast just kind of falls into place, and here it is. It gels, and I went, okay, I've got to change the name of the podcast. I've got to go into production at some point. So by late December of 2020, I went into production. We just uploaded podcast number 8 this past Monday. So that's how it started.
Cool.
It was just kind of going, I've got something to do here that I need to do.
Yeah.
If
you had to, and you've spoken about this, but if you had to put it into like a sentence, what is the purpose of this endeavor?
Simply tell the story of Jesus in a way that maybe people have never heard before.
And what do you hope will happen through it?
I hope that God will bless the hearers with knowledge and a desire to be like Jesus, whatever that means in their life.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they may be coming to faith for the first time, or they may need to strengthen their faith and become more like Jesus. And that's what I want to see. That's what I want to see.
You know, one thing I listened to episode 1 and 2. I will continue to listen to all the rest of these. I just haven't had time yet.
Takes a while.
It takes a while. I know. I just heard about it yesterday. But one thing you said in the first episode was that your goal is not to provide a large degree of analysis on the teachings of or the meaning of. You're really just trying to tell the story and provide analysis in terms of the context.
Right.
But I think you even said, I want people to be able to make up their own minds or to be able to have conversations with others. And that's an interesting approach. Like, you're really just wanting to tell the story.
I want to tell the story in a very straightforward and plain way and let people make up their own minds. Is this Jesus a Jesus I need to know or not? It's not a preachy podcast. I tell people that I'm not telling the story through a preacher filter. Okay. Now, Lord willing and time willing, I probably may add a podcast, what I'm going to call Jesus Stories Extras, where I do preach a little bit. But for the basic podcast, it's going to be just the story.
Yeah.
Just
because the story has power.
The story is powerful.
It is power.
Yes.
The name of Jesus is powerful.
Yes. Yes.
So, and we need it. We need it
we
so
need
much.
it very badly.
Now, I know, and you just said this, right? So you're relatively new in terms of total numbers of podcasts. You're 8 in so far, and I have no idea how far into the life of Christ that is, because I haven't heard number 8 yet. But you started in December. It's now March. I know you've got a ways to go, certainly. How have you already witnessed God rewarding your efforts to reach others? I know there's something specific that you've been surprised by. So share with us.
I will get to that in just a minute.
Okay.
But let's talk locally for just a minute. Okay. One of the things I've done is I tell the people about this podcast. Okay. One of the things I did was I had business cards made up. Okay. These business cards are basically just an invitation to listen to Jesus stories. All right, with the website posted there. And I will take these and I will hand them to people that I bump into, whether it be a cashier at a grocery store or a waitress at a restaurant or somebody that I know through the part-time work that I do. Okay, so I will hand these out. And I've already seen the people that I see on a recurring basis from my job. They're already coming to me and going, George, this has blessed me.
Really?
Yes.
So you've heard them come to you and say that already. That's fantastic.
Yes. And they're going, one young lady told me, said, I'm sitting there listening to it, and it's like, I've got to hear the next, and I've got to hear the next, and I've got to hear the next. It's addictive. So
that's all. I listened to the second one this morning when I was getting ready.
Yeah.
I was like, all right, let's hear some Jesus stories.
Thank you. So now here's the unexpected benefit. At this point, and I'm going to go to figures from this morning, okay? In 3 months' time, this is all of January, all of December, or all of February, and to this point on the 24th of March.
Yeah.
We have had 6,440 downloads of this podcast.
Which is a lot for some random person's podcast.
Exactly.
That's not promoted in any way other than word of mouth.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, there are the usual social media posts.
So you can promote your own things.
Yeah, I'm on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and so those promotions are there. But out of those 6,440 downloads, 5,640 came from India.
That's what I heard. That's
India.
Unbelievable.
India. Yeah, better than 3/4 of the downloads are from India. And you're just going, India?
India.
Yeah. I mean, this is a country known for persecuting Christians. And people are reaching out to hear the story of Jesus. I love it.
I was trying to figure out how this could be. And I know you don't know, but here's my internal, my head canon for this, right?
Okay.
People in India that have access to the internet that are desperate for Christ, and maybe they heard about him from a local missionary or in some form or fashion. And they say, I want to hear the stories of Jesus. Maybe they don't have access to a Bible. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they get onto Apple Podcast or wherever you can find it. And they just type in Jesus stories, and that's the name of yours.
Yep.
And so they find it and they start listening. That's what I think and feel like is happening. And it's amazing.
The other thing that is a part of this, I know the podcast provider that I use that hosts my podcast has specifically an outreach toward the Indian equivalent of like Pandora and Spotify.
Really?
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Which also hosts podcasts like Pandora and Spotify do. And by the way, this podcast is on Pandora and Spotify as well.
Gotcha.
But so I know I'm on those services, but people would have to actually go looking for it.
Yeah.
In order to, and if you type in the name Jesus, obviously Jesus Stories is coming up in India.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's stunning.
I love what that tells us, that people in the world that do not come from a Western Christian context
Right.
are hungry for Jesus,
Right.
and to hear the stories of,
Right.
and you're not the only one, certainly, but you are helping to provide access to the story of our Savior, and people are listening to it, and
Absolutely.
they're finding it in weird places.
Yeah. Yeah.
In places where, Buddhism or Hinduism is the predominant, cultural religion, but they're finding Christ there.
Yeah.
From 12,000 miles away.
Exactly.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah.
And I hope you feel blessed by that, because I think that is a blessing that you are receiving from God through that.
I am stunned by what God can do. And I shouldn't be, but I am.
It's humbling.
Yeah.
It's weird to say humbling because it does fill you up, but it's also, surely you would realize, like, this is not because of George Taylor. This is because of what God is doing.
Exactly.
And I think that's such a powerful lesson for all of us. Whatever our form of evangelizing the world, whether it's only in person or whether it's baking cookies or, as Sherry Shannon does, or if it's making a podcast or whatever, it doesn't have to be complicated.
Sherry needs to come to my house.
Hey, say it loud enough, she probably will. All of us, God will use our efforts if we are sincere in our efforts, and He wants His Son's name to be known throughout the nations. It's pretty awesome.
Amen.
But I know it's not easy,
No.
and I know you have faced obstacles and will continue to. So share with us, like, what have you had to struggle through, whether it was in creating this podcast or just in face-to-face interactions you've had with people over the years? What have you been challenged by?
Couple of things. The first thing is the obstacle called time. Okay.
Yeah.
Creating a podcast takes time. I will spend the better part of 6 to 8 hours actually writing one of these, and it's only 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
Okay. I will spend probably another 4 to 5 hours actually producing the podcast, getting it uploaded, and getting the proper notifications out to the proper websites that are the social media sites. So a podcast is really an effort of add those two up, 10, 12 hours in order to make that happen.
For 20 minutes.
Yeah, for 20 minutes of time.
Yeah.
Yeah. You produce one too. So
Every now and then. Yeah.
So here's the issue of time is a big issue, because I am not only producing this podcast, I'm working part-time 20 hours a week, and being a husband and a grandfather, and helping to take care of the things that go with a house. And I mean, it's just
life
stuff. And you've got to actually carve out the time to make this happen if you really want to make it happen. I sat down Monday, which is, I've carved out that day to be a podcast day, basically. And I sat down that Monday and I put out episode number 8. I had already written it. I did the fine tuning, fine editing, and then went into the studio, recorded it, edited it, and sent it out. So that was a day-long process. I need to get to writing because I've only got 10 episodes written and I just put up number 8. So
better get on that.
We got to get on that. So that's the first obstacle.
Yeah.
Here's the second,
which is true for anybody, no matter what they're doing.
Exactly.
Finding time in our busy schedules to be Jesus people.
Yeah.
We got to figure it out.
And that's the thing. We've got to make a deliberate effort to consciously create the time. Okay. Wherever that is.
To have the conversation.
Exactly.
Or to meet the person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Now, here's the other thing. I am actually an introvert. Most people look at me and go, "Are you really?" I'm going, "Yeah, I am, really." You watch me in a crowded room. I'm an introvert, okay? So I'm not comfortable approaching people with just some kind of a thing like, "Do you know Jesus?" or something like that.
A cold call.
Yeah, a cold
in
call.
person.
I've done cold calls as a salesperson, and I hated them. I hated them with a passion. It's just not my nature. So I created the business card.
Yeah.
And I walk up to somebody and I will ask them the question, "Do you listen to podcasts?" It's an innocent question that's not going to raise any hackles. Okay? And it opens a door for them to talk back to me. I've only had 2 people tell me, "No, I don't." One of them was a young lady who actually was the oldest sibling of 6. So I went, "Oh, you don't have time." But I gave her a card anyway.
Gotcha. If you want to, here's a card.
Yeah. If you want to, here's a card. But this creates an opening, and most people will look at it and go, "Okay." And now whether they listen or not, I don't know. I do know this, there are 700 downloads out of North America. Okay? All right? Not 5,000 like India, but there are 700. Yeah. And some of them are in the greater Chattanooga area. And I'm going, okay, this is happening because of this little deal. Now, here's the cool thing that I did. People can promote my podcast themselves and become an introverted evangelist like this, okay? Because if you go to my website, not only do you have all the links for my social media places, but there is under a tab called Share This Podcast, there's a template of this card. So you can download
your own.
You can download this template and print your own cards if you want to try this method out. So
that's cool.
It's different.
It is different.
It's different.
Yeah.
Okay. And I look at it, it's a non-threatening way to introduce Jesus. Now, most of the times I just hand them the card just like it is. It doesn't have any personal information on it, but there's a website address and my email address is on the website. Yeah.
There are ways to be in contact.
There are ways to be in contact. But, if you wanted to pass them out and you say, "Well, listen to 1 or 2 and call me back," and you can there's space to put your name on there.
Sure.
and your phone number. So, you can create.
It could be used as a tool.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what it's intended for.
Create conversations.
Exactly.
As you said, you were born in the 50s. So
very early 50s.
You are that old, as you said. Now, one of the questions we've liked to ask recently is, if you could go back to visit yourself at age, and then you can pick the age you want, what would you say to your younger self to help younger self really take ownership of, Jesus and life? What would you say? Who would you visit?
I would say I would visit me at age 22. Okay. And I would do 2 things. I would say, hang in there with the church. It will change. You just need to study and become the change yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
There's some other personal things I would say, but I won't share those.
That's great though. Become the change yourself.
Yeah, become the change. Yeah.
That's a valuable thing for us to learn.
Yeah.
All right. So what would you say to the people that are listening that may feel like reaching people for Jesus, disciple making, is somebody else's job, or that they're not equipped to do it themselves? What insight could you provide for such a person?
Well, I think the thing to realize is that everybody relates to people in different ways. Okay. The way you and I talk together are going to be entirely different from the way Evan and I talk together. Evan's, your compadre in ministry here at Clear Creek.
Indeed.
Yeah. And so, I mean, it's a different relationship. Okay. So we relate to each other in different ways, and that falls everywhere we go in life. Okay. So how we relate with people is different from person to person to person. And we've got to figure out, okay, how do I share Jesus with this specific person? Which comes down to praying about it and then acting on it. Prayer's great, but somewhere along the line you've got to move.
Yeah, we are the instrument.
We are the instrument. We are the instrument, and let God handle it, and depend on God for the result. Mm-hmm. Okay,
and knowing how to approach a person requires you to know the person.
Yes,
like we're trying to be really clear here that when we talk about reaching the next person for Jesus, which is our church's official mission, recently adopted, you probably already know that person.
Probably.
Or at least you're going to get to know them. We're not asking you to necessarily go stand on the street corner, although that can work. Mm-hmm. Podcasting is kind of like a digital street corner thing.
It is a digital street corner, yes.
But when it comes to like discipling someone, that's a relationship, and you got to know them, or you're not going to really get anywhere.
Yeah. Exactly. So if you're like me and you are introverted. The whole idea of having some tool to open the door and put a crack through the door, like this card,
sure,
can help an awful lot.
Yeah,
just to open the conversation, even with somebody you do know.
Yeah.
Okay.
You're right.
So because so many relationships, I look back over the years and I'm going, there are so many relationships where the name Jesus never came up.
People you knew well.
Yeah, people I knew well, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. I pray God put somebody else in their life.
Yeah. Could have been you. Could have been me,
Yep.
And that's good for us to remember.
Yep.
All right. Plug your podcast.
All right. So if you want to hear this podcast, best thing to do starting out, you can just go to my website. It's jesusstories.info. Let me say that again. jesusstories.info. Jesus Stories is all run together. There is a link on the website that says listen. You can listen to the podcast there. There's also a column on that page which will allow you to subscribe on any of the services that offer podcasts here in the United States and some even internationally. So, apparently. So you can click on one of those links and subscribe. Or you can go to your favorite podcast player, put in Jesus Stories and do a search. And what you want to look for, because there are actually a couple of other podcasts out there with similar names, and those come up. But what you want to look for is a guy dressed in a kind of a first century robe with his arms out wide like he's about to hug you. Okay? That's the icon for the podcast.
That's the Jesus image.
That's the Jesus image on the okay, and that's what you look for. And if you found that, you found my podcast. And I invite you to subscribe. Once you subscribe and listen, I would invite you to put a rating on it, as well as maybe even a review, because ratings and reviews are what drive listenership. That's the way people find podcasts. Yeah. If more people rate this podcast, more people will find it just by pulling up Jesus Stories. Mm-hmm. Mine will go to the top.
Yeah.
So
I went on Apple Podcasts, or I can't remember what it's actually called, iTunes Podcast or something.
iTunes, yeah.
I didn't know the name of it at the time, so I just wrote your name in, George Taylor, and it popped up. So your name also is a way to find it. While you're at it, you can rate and review the Clear Creek Chat podcast.
Yes, you can do that as well.
Shameless plug of my own. Well, that's all the time we've got for today's chat. George, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
This was fun.
It was good.
But more importantly, thank you for exemplifying how any of us can use our God-given gifts. In your case, you've got the voice, and the knowledge of how to produce something, using whatever it is that's our gift to share the message of Jesus with others. To all the rest of you out there, remember, if you're a disciple, you are called to spread the good news of Jesus Christ to your neighbors throughout your city and to the ends of the earth. Grace and peace.